My name is Jessica, and this happened during my sophomore year of college. I was living in the dorms at State, sharing a room with my roommate Amanda. She was one of those people who could sleep through a tornado, which is important to remember for later. Our dorm was on the 3rd floor of Morrison Hall, and honestly, I felt pretty safe there. Card access, security guards, the whole 9 yards. It was a Tuesday night in October when I first noticed something was off. I'd come back from my evening biology lab around 9:30, and Amanda was already asleep, with her noise machine going full blast. I went through my usual routine, but when I went to grab my phone charger from my desk, it wasn't where I always left it. I'm pretty obsessive about keeping things in their exact spots. The charger was still on my desk, but moved about 6 inches to the right. I figured Amanda had borrowed it while I was in class. No big deal. But the next morning, Amanda asked me why I'd moved her textbooks around on her desk. I told her I hadn't touched them, and she gave me this weird look. Amanda said, "They were stacked differently when I woke up, chemistry on top instead of psychology." But then it kept happening. Little things, almost too small to notice. My shower caddy moved from one hook to another. The mini fridge unplugged overnight. My desk chair adjusted to a different height. The really unsettling part was how specific some of the changes were. My alarm clock was changed from 7 a.m. to 6:45 a.m. on a Thursday morning, which happened to be the exact day I had an 8 a.m. midterm. 3 weeks into this pattern, I decided to set up a test. I left a piece of tape across my desk drawer. The next morning, the tape was intact, but everything inside had been rearranged. My pens were sorted by color. Someone had taken everything out, organized it, and put it back without disturbing the tape. We reported it to our RA, Kyle, who talked to security. 3 other rooms on our floor had reported similar incidents. Officer Brooks came to our dorm and listened to every detail. He told us that what we were describing sounded like surveillance behavior, someone mapping out our schedules and testing our awareness levels. We installed a small security camera in our room, hidden inside a fake plant. For 3 nights, nothing happened. Then on Tuesday night, the camera caught him. At 2:47 a.m., a man entered our room using what looked like a master key. He moved slowly, methodically, like he'd done this many times before. The footage showed him standing at the foot of my bed for almost 5 minutes, just watching me sleep. The most disturbing part was how familiar he seemed with our room layout. He never bumped into anything or turned on lights. At one point, he pulled out a small notebook and wrote something down while looking at my desk calendar. Before leaving, he made his usual small adjustments, moved my phone charger 6 inches to the right, adjusted the height of Amanda's chair. Officer Brooks and campus security arrested him the next day. His name was Marcus, and he worked as a night janitor in our building. They found notebooks in his apartment filled with detailed schedules for dozens of girls. What time we woke up, when we had classes, what we ate for dinner. Marcus had pages and pages about me and Amanda specifically. Amanda transferred to a different school the next semester. Even now, years later, I'm obsessive about checking logs, and I can't sleep without some kind of security system in my bedroom. This happened about 8 months ago. My name is Robert, and I'm pretty private about my personal information. I don't do social media much. I keep my phone number unlisted, and I'm generally careful about who I give my contact details to, which is why what started happening to me was so disturbing. It began with a voicemail on a Thursday afternoon in March. I was in a meeting when my phone buzzed, and when I checked it later, there was a message from a number I didn't recognize. The voice was male, probably middle-aged. He said, "Hi, Robert. I saw you ordered the turkey sandwich at Corner Bakery today. Good choice. The one on 6th Street has better bread though. Talk soon." I had ordered a turkey sandwich that day from the Corner Bakery on Lamar Boulevard, and the caller had used my first name. 2 days later, I got another voicemail from the same number. The voice said, "Robert, you should really consider taking a different route to work. The construction on Mopag is going to get worse next week, and you'll be late for your 9 a.m. stand-up meeting if you don't leave by 8:15. Also, you might want to get that noise in your car checked out." This person knew my work schedule, knew what time my meetings were, and somehow knew about the weird whining sound my car had been making. I called the number back, but it went straight to a generic voicemail box. My friend Tracy, who works in telecom, tried to trace the number but came up empty. The calls kept coming, always with more specific details about my daily life. The caller knew what grocery store I shopped at and what items I'd bought. He knew I'd been to the dentist. He knew I'd called in sick because I had food poisoning. What made it even more unsettling was that the caller seemed to be giving me genuine advice. He warned me about traffic delays that turned out to be accurate. After 2 weeks, I went to the police. Detective Chen took it seriously and suggested I start documenting everything. But the day after I talked to Detective Chen, I got a voicemail that said, "Robert, I hope your meeting with the police went well yesterday. Detective Chen seems nice. You should listen to her advice about changing your routine, but it won't help." The caller knew I'd been to the police station. He knew the name of the detective I had spoken with. I started becoming paranoid about everything. I stopped using credit cards, varied my route to work, even left my phone at home sometimes. None of it mattered. The calls continued. The breaking point came 3 weeks later. I got a call while I was at work, sitting in our secure office building. The voicemail said, "Robert, you look tired today. That blue shirt is a good color on you, but you might want to get a haircut this weekend. Also, your coworker Mike keeps staring at your screen when you're working." I was wearing a blue shirt that day. Mike sits 2 desks over from me and does have a habit of looking at other people's computers. Someone was watching me right now, in real time, from inside our supposedly secure office building. Detective Chen came to my workplace within an hour. We searched the entire floor for hidden cameras. We found nothing. Then the call suddenly stopped. For 2 weeks, nothing. Then I got one final message. The voice said, "Robert, I'm moving on to a new project, but I want you to know that I enjoyed our time together. The police will never find me because I was never really there. Take care of yourself." That was 8 months ago. I moved to a different city last month, partly for a new job, but mostly because I wanted a fresh start. I still find myself looking over my shoulder sometimes, wondering if someone out there is still watching. My name is Sophie, and this happened last summer when I was babysitting for the Carter family. I'd been watching their 8-year-old son, Ethan, for about 3 months. They were a nice family in one of those upscale neighborhoods, and they'd recently installed a security system throughout their house. Cameras in the living room, kitchen, front hallway, and upstairs landing. They'd given me access to the app so I could check the feeds if needed. Everything was normal for the first couple months. I'd check the security app once or twice during the night, mainly just to make sure the system was working. The first weird thing I noticed was in early July. The living room camera seemed like it had been adjusted slightly, zoomed in more than usual. Then I noticed the camera was moving, actually panning slowly from left to right, like someone was controlling it remotely. I assumed Mr. or Mrs. Carter was checking in on us from their phones. The next week, I noticed the cameras were moving around more frequently, focusing on doorways when I walked between rooms, like someone was tracking my movements. But then, Ethan said something that made me uncomfortable. I was helping him with homework when he looked up at the camera and said, "Are my mum and dad watching us right now?" I told him they might be, and Ethan replied, "They watch us every night, even when they're home." He said he could hear a camera moving in his room at night. When I asked him to show me, he pointed to a small device near his ceiling that I'd assumed was a smoke detector. That night, I asked Mr. and Mrs. Carter about the bedroom camera. Mrs. Carter looked confused and said there wasn't a camera in Ethan's room. When I insisted that Ethan had shown me something, Mr. Carter went upstairs to check. He came back with a strange expression. Mr. Carter said, "There is something up there, but it's not part of our system." Mrs. Carter immediately called their security company. The technician found that someone had installed additional cameras throughout the house that weren't part of the official system. These hidden cameras were streaming footage to an external server. The technician found cameras in Ethan's bedroom, both bathrooms, the master bedroom, and even inside closets. The police treated it as a serious crime. Detective Williams explained that someone had been making money by streaming live footage of the Carters without their knowledge. The investigation revealed that the hidden cameras had been installed about 6 months earlier and were accessible through a website that required paid membership. They never found out who installed the cameras. The investigation traced the video feeds to servers in different countries. Detective Williams said, "These operations are set up to be nearly impossible to track." The Carter family moved out within 2 weeks. They couldn't stand the thought of living somewhere that had been so thoroughly violated. I stopped babysitting after that experience. Every time I'm in someone else's house now, I find myself looking for small devices that might be cameras. The idea that someone could be watching and recording without you knowing is terrifying. My name is Nina, and this happened just 3 months ago. I'd recently moved into a new apartment in a modern complex that advertised itself as smart home ready. Smart thermostat, smart locks, smart lighting, even a smart doorbell and security system. At first, I loved living there. I could adjust the temperature from bed, turn off lights from anywhere, and monitor security cameras from my phone. The first sign that something was wrong came on a Tuesday evening in late October. I was working late when I got a notification that my front door had been unlocked. The app showed the lock had been opened using a secondary authorized device. But I was the only person with access, and I was sitting at my desk 20 minutes away. I figured it was probably a glitch. But then it happened again 2 nights later. My friend Alex, who works in IT security, came over to help me check the settings. He found that several of my smart home apps had been accessed from IP addresses I didn't recognize. Someone else definitely had access to my system. We changed all my passwords and enabled 2-factor authentication. For a week, everything seemed normal. Then things got much more disturbing. I was watching TV when the lights suddenly dimmed to almost nothing. My sound system turned on and started playing strange instrumental music. My thermostat started rapidly changing temperatures. The smart TV changed channels by itself. Even my coffee maker turned on at 10 p.m. I grabbed my phone to regain control, but the app showed that all these changes were being made by my account. Someone wasn't just accessing my smart home system, they were controlling it in real time while I was in the apartment. Someone was watching me through the security cameras and manipulating my environment. I immediately unplugged every smart device and turned off my Wi-Fi router. I spent the night at Alex's place and called the police. Officer Martinez said what I was describing sounded like smart home hijacking. The investigation revealed that my apartment complex's Wi-Fi network had been compromised. Hackers had gained access to the building's internet infrastructure and were using it to infiltrate residents' smart home systems. Officer Martinez said, I was one of at least 12 residents who had experienced similar problems. The really disturbing part was that the hackers had been recording footage from security cameras and sharing it online. The property management company hired a cybersecurity firm to investigate. James, the lead investigator, explained that the hackers had been operating this scheme for months, targeting multiple apartment complexes. They were making money by selling access to people's smart home systems and by monetizing recorded footage. I moved out within a month. Even in my new apartment, I'm extremely cautious about smart home technology. The convenience isn't worth the risk of having strangers control your living environment and monitor your most private moments. My name is Ashley, and this happened during my morning runs last spring. I've always been an early riser, and I love getting my workout done before the rest of the world wakes up. I'd established a routine where I'd leave my house at 6 a.m. and run a 5-mile loop through several neighborhoods. Same route every day, same time, same pace. The first time I noticed the car was on a Wednesday morning in early April. It was a dark blue sedan parked on Maple Street about 2 miles into my route. There was someone sitting in the driver's seat. The next morning, the same car was parked in almost the exact same spot, and the same person was behind the wheel. A middle-aged white male wearing sunglasses even though the sun was barely up. By Friday, I was paying more attention. Same spot, same time, same person just sitting there as I ran past. The following Monday, the car wasn't on Maple Street. But then, about half a mile later, I saw the same blue sedan parked on Oak Avenue. The driver was in the same position, just watching. Over the next 2 weeks, the car was never in the same spot 2 days in a row, but it was always somewhere along my 5-mile route. Sometimes near the beginning, sometimes in the middle, sometimes closer to the end. But it was always there, and the driver was always watching when I passed. I told my friend Derek about the situation, and he suggested I vary my routine to see if the car would follow me. So I started running completely different routes, downtown trail systems, different neighborhoods entirely. Every single time, within a few days, the blue sedan would appear somewhere along my new route. That's when I knew for certain that this person was following me, learning my patterns, and positioning himself to watch me run. Derek convinced me to call the police. Officer Martinez took my report seriously and said what I was describing sounded like stalking behavior. Officer Martinez suggested I try to get the license plate number and maybe take photos if I felt safe doing so. The next morning, I brought my phone and managed to get pictures of the car and a partial license plate. 2 days later, Officer Martinez called me back with disturbing news. The car was registered to a man named Sam Collins, who had been arrested multiple times for stalking and harassment. Officer Martinez said Collins had a pattern of following women who exercised regularly, learning their routines, and eventually escalating to attempted abduction. There were warrants out for his arrest in connection with 2 missing women in neighboring counties. Officer Martinez set up a sting operation. I agreed to run my usual route, while undercover officers positioned themselves along the way. Sure enough, Collins showed up in his blue sedan. When he started following me in his car instead of just watching from a park position, the officers moved in and arrested him. They found detailed notes in his car about my running schedule, maps of my routes, and photographs of me taken without my knowledge. Collins had been planning to grab me during one of my runs. Officer Martinez said I was lucky I'd noticed the pattern and reported it when I did. Collins was charged with stalking and conspiracy to commit kidnapping. During his trial, prosecutors revealed that he'd been using similar tactics to target at least 6 other women. 2 of them had disappeared, and their cases remained unsolved. I don't run alone anymore, and I never follow the same route twice. The experience taught me that predictable routines can make you vulnerable to people with bad intentions. Sometimes, what seems like paranoia is actually your instincts trying to keep you safe. My name is Paul, and this happened to my family just 6 months ago. I live with my wife Linda and our teenage daughter Grace in a quiet suburban neighborhood. We'd recently installed a smart doorbell camera after a few package thefts in the area. The doorbell camera sends alerts to our phones whenever it detects motion. For the first few weeks, it worked exactly as expected. But then, we started getting motion alerts in the middle of the night. The first time it happened, I checked the app and saw a figure walking up our front steps at 2:30 a.m. The person was wearing dark clothes and moved confidently toward our front door. After about 30 seconds, the person walked away. I got up to check our front door. It was still locked. No signs of attempted break-in. I figured it was probably just someone who had gotten confused about which house they were looking for. But the same thing happened 2 nights later. This time, I watched the live feed as it happened, and I could see the person insert what looked like a key into our lock. The door opened. The person stepped inside for just a few seconds, then came back out and locked the door behind them. I immediately woke up Linda. We crept downstairs to check the house, but everything seemed normal. Nothing was missing, nothing disturbed. But someone had definitely entered our house using a key that worked in our lock. The next morning, we called a locksmith to change all our locks. When he arrived, he examined our old lock and told us something that made our blood run cold. He said our lock showed signs of having been picked multiple times recently. Someone had been practicing on our lock. We also called the police. Detective Ryan reviewed the doorbell camera footage and said what we'd captured looked like someone was casing our house. He was particularly concerned that the person seemed to have a key that worked in our lock. We installed additional security cameras and changed our locks to a more secure system. For 3 weeks, nothing happened. We started to think maybe the new locks had solved the problem. Then Grace came home from school one afternoon and found a note on her bedroom pillow. The note said, "I like what you've done with your room. The new posters are nice. Sweet dreams." Grace screamed when she found it, and Linda called 911 immediately. Detective Ryan responded personally and brought a forensics team. They found that someone had been inside our house again, this time during daylight hours while we were all at work and school. The person had entered through our back door using another copied key. The investigation revealed that our house keys had been copied during a break-in at a local locksmith shop 2 months earlier. Our house was one of dozens that had been targeted. Detective Ryan said the person entering our house was probably gathering information for a larger burglary or home invasion. We ended up moving to a different house within 6 weeks of finding that note. The case remained unsolved, but the experience taught us that home security isn't just about preventing break-ins. Sometimes people can walk right through your front door if they've planned carefully enough. My name is Brian, and this happened over the course of about 2 months last fall. I work long hours as a software developer, and I'd gotten into the habit of ordering food delivery almost every night. I live alone in a small apartment, and cooking after a 12-hour workday just wasn't happening. The first time my food went missing was on a Tuesday in September. I'd ordered Thai food from my usual place, and the app showed that it had been delivered. But when I went downstairs to my apartment building's lobby, there was no food waiting for me. I called the restaurant, and Carlos, the manager, said their driver had definitely delivered it and left it by the mailboxes like always. I figured maybe another resident had taken it by mistake. Carlos was cool about it and sent me a replacement order. But then it happened again 3 days later. This time, I was watching from my window. When the delivery driver arrived, I saw him walk into my building carrying a bag, and I went downstairs immediately. The driver was gone, but so was my food. Over the next 2 weeks, this happened 5 more times. Always the same pattern. Order placed, delivery confirmed, food photographed in the right location, but gone by the time I got downstairs. I started going to the lobby immediately after getting delivery notifications, but the food always disappeared in the few minutes between delivery and my arrival. That's when I decided to test something. I ordered food, but didn't go downstairs to get it. Instead, I watched from my window to see if anyone would come into the building after the delivery. Sure enough, about 10 minutes after the driver left, a man in his 30s walked into my building. He came out a few minutes later carrying what looked like a takeout bag. The next time I ordered food, I went downstairs and hid in the stairwell where I could see the mailbox area. The driver delivered my order and left. About 8 minutes later, the same man walked in and went straight to where my food was sitting. I confronted him as he was walking toward the exit. I said, "Excuse me, that's my food." The man looked surprised and said, "Oh, sorry, I thought this was mine. I ordered from the same place." But when I asked to see his order confirmation, he couldn't produce one. He handed me the bag and quickly left. I followed him outside and got his license plate number. I called the police, and Maya, a detective, took my report. I also asked my friend Jake, who works in cybersecurity, to help me figure out how this guy knew when I was ordering food. Jake discovered that my building has a shared Wi-Fi network that doesn't require a password. Someone sitting in a car across the street could potentially access that network and monitor delivery app traffic. Jake also found that my email account had been accessed from an IP address near my building. The investigation revealed that the man stealing my food was part of a larger operation targeting multiple apartment buildings. They'd been hacking into residents' accounts, monitoring their food orders, and stealing deliveries systematically. The police arrested 3 people in connection with the scheme. Now I'm much more careful about app security and Wi-Fi networks. I also have all my deliveries sent directly to my apartment door. The experience made me realize how easy it is for criminals to exploit our digital habits in ways we never consider. My name is Chloe, and this happened in the apartment I was renting downtown last year. It was a small one-bedroom place in an older building, but the rent was reasonable. The landlord, Pete, seemed decent when I signed the lease. He mentioned that the previous tenant had moved out suddenly and left some belongings behind. For the first month, everything seemed normal, but then I started noticing small things that didn't make sense. Food disappearing from my refrigerator, not entire meals, just small amounts that I might not notice right away. A few slices of bread, some leftover pasta, half a carton of milk. At first, I assumed I was just forgetting what I'd eaten. But then, I started keeping mental notes of exactly what was in my fridge, and the pattern became undeniable. Someone was taking my food. I thought maybe Pete was letting himself in to do maintenance and helping himself to snacks. I installed a small security camera in my kitchen, but the camera never caught Pete or anyone else entering my apartment. The food kept disappearing, but the camera showed empty rooms during the times when the theft must have occurred. Then one night in November, I heard scratching sounds coming from inside my walls. It was faint but persistent, like someone moving around in the space between apartments. The scratching sounds got louder and more frequent, moving from room to room. I called Pete to ask about pest control, and he sent an exterminator. But the exterminator couldn't find any signs of rodents. He did mention that the building had unusual architectural features, including crawl spaces that weren't marked on floor plans. I upgraded my security system and installed cameras in every room. For 3 days, nothing unusual showed up. Then on Thursday night, one of the cameras captured something that made my blood run cold. At 3:20 a.m., a panel in my bedroom wall slid open and a man crawled out. He was thin, dirty, with long, greasy hair and clothes that looked like they hadn't been washed in months. He moved through my apartment like he knew the layout perfectly, going straight to my kitchen and helping himself to food. He used my bathroom, then spent about an hour sitting on my couch watching my TV. Before leaving, he went into my bedroom and stood next to my bed for several minutes, just watching me sleep. Then he crawled back into the wall. The whole time, I never woke up. I called 911 immediately after reviewing the footage. Officer Davis responded and was just as disturbed by the video as I was. The investigation revealed that the man was Vincent, the previous tenant who had supposedly moved out suddenly. Vincent had never actually left the building. Vincent had been living in the crawl spaces and utility areas between apartments, accessing my unit through a hidden panel connected to the building's old dumbwaiter system. He'd been stealing food, using my bathroom, and watching me sleep for over 2 months. Pete claimed he had no idea, but police found evidence that Pete had been aware and accepting rent payments from Vincent to let him stay hidden. Both were arrested. I moved out immediately and broke my lease. The thought of someone watching me sleep and living inches away from my bedroom was too traumatic to get over. My name is Jason, and this happened during what was supposed to be a romantic weekend getaway with my girlfriend Kelly last summer. We'd booked a vacation rental through one of those popular apps, a cute little cabin about 2 hours outside the city. The host, Rebecca, seemed friendly when we messaged her about the booking. The cabin was exactly as advertised when we arrived on Friday afternoon. Rebecca met us there to hand over the keys and give us a quick tour. She seemed normal enough, maybe a little overly interested in our plans for the weekend. Kelly and I spent Friday evening relaxing, and Saturday was perfect hiking, time by the lake, romantic dinner. It wasn't until Sunday morning that I noticed something odd. I was taking a shower when I saw what looked like a small hole in the bathroom wall, about eye level. It was partially hidden behind a towel rack, but when I moved the towel, I could see it clearly. The hole was maybe half an inch wide and looked like it had been drilled deliberately. I called Kelly over to look at it, and she was immediately uncomfortable. Kelly said it looked like a peephole. We started examining the bathroom more carefully and found two more small holes, both positioned where someone could see the shower and toilet areas. We decided to check the rest of the cabin. In the bedroom, we found similar holes near the bed and dresser. The living room had holes that would provide a view of the couch and kitchen area. Every room had multiple peepholes, all carefully positioned and partially concealed. Kelly wanted to leave immediately, but I convinced her to let me investigate first. I went outside and walked around the cabin, trying to figure out where someone would access these viewing points. The cabin sat on stilts with a crawl space underneath that was tall enough for a person to move around in. I found an access door under the back deck and opened it. Inside the crawl space, I discovered an elaborate setup. Someone had built platforms and walkways that connected to each of the peepholes. There were comfortable chairs positioned at viewing points, snacks stored in coolers, and even blankets. The most disturbing part was finding recording equipment. Multiple cameras connected to what looked like a live streaming setup with cables running to broadcasting equipment. Someone wasn't just watching guests, that they were recording them and potentially streaming the footage online. I took photos with my phone and called the police immediately. We packed up and drove to the nearest police station. An IT specialist helped with the investigation and confirmed what we'd found sounded like a commercial voyeurism operation. The investigation revealed that Rebecca and her partner had been running this scheme for over 2 years. They'd installed spy cameras and peepholes in multiple vacation rental properties and were selling access to live streams of guests without consent. Rebecca and her partner were arrested and charged with the multiple felonies. The case made local news, and dozens of other guests came forward to report similar experiences. Kelly and I had to testify in court, which was humiliating and traumatic. The experience completely changed how I think about vacation rentals and privacy. Now I spend the first hour of any rental carefully inspecting for cameras, peepholes, or anything suspicious. The idea that someone could turn your romantic getaway into entertainment for strangers is sickening. My name is Luke, and this happened during my senior year of high school, about 1.5 years ago. I was really into online gaming, spent most of my free time playing this multiplayer strategy game with people from all over the world. One of my regular teammates was someone who went by the username Midnight Strategist. We'd been playing together for almost 6 months and had developed what I thought was a normal gaming friendship. Midnight Strategist was good at the game and seemed like a cool person to hang out with online. We'd chat while playing, usually about game strategy, but sometimes about other stuff. School, movies, whatever. He said he was in college and lived somewhere on the West Coast. I'm from Ohio, so I figured we'd probably never meet in person, but that's normal for online gaming friends. Over time, our conversations got more personal. He'd ask about my family, what my house was like, what my daily routine looked like. At the time, it just seemed like friendly conversation. I told him about my parents, Janet and Steve, and how my mum worked from home while my dad traveled for business. I mentioned that our house was pretty big, and that I had my own gaming setup in the basement. Midnight Strategist seemed really interested in the details of my gaming room. He asked about my equipment, where my computer was positioned, whether I had windows in the basement, stuff like that. I thought he was just curious about my setup because he was thinking about upgrading his own gaming rig. He also asked a lot of questions about my schedule. When I played games, when I did homework, when my parents were usually home or away. I didn't think much of it because gamers often coordinate their schedules to play together. It seemed natural that he'd want to know when I'd be online. But then he started knowing things about my life that I hadn't told him. One night while we were playing, he mentioned that I'd been sick earlier that week and had missed school. I didn't remember telling him that. Another time, he asked how my mum's new car was working out. My mum had just bought a car, but I was pretty sure I hadn't mentioned it in our chats. When I asked how he knew these things, Midnight Strategist would say I'd mentioned them before, and I'd probably just forgotten. That seemed plausible, because we talked a lot during our gaming sessions, and I didn't remember every detail of our conversations. The first really disturbing moment came in early March. We were in the middle of a game when the Midnight Strategist said, "Your mum just got home. I can hear her car in the driveway." I was in the basement wearing headphones, so I hadn't heard anything. But when I went upstairs a few minutes later, my mum, Janet, was indeed just coming through the front door with groceries. I asked Midnight Strategist how he'd known my mum was coming home, and he said he'd heard it through my microphone. But I knew that wasn't possible. My gaming headset has noise cancellation, and the basement is soundproofed. There's no way my microphone would pick up sounds from our driveway. That's when I started paying more attention to the things Midnight Strategist said during our conversations. He'd make comments about the weather at my location, even though I'd never told him what city I lived in. He'd ask about specific rooms in my house that I was sure I'd never described. He knew details about my family's schedule that were too accurate to be coincidental. The breaking point came on a Thursday night in April. My dad Steve was out of town on a business trip, and my mum was working late at her home office upstairs. I was gaming in the basement around 10 p.m. when Midnight Strategist said, "You should probably check on your mum. She fell asleep at her desk, and her computer is still running." I thought he was just being weird, but I went upstairs to check anyway. My mum was indeed asleep at her desk in her home office, exactly as Midnight Strategist had described. Her computer was still on, and she had papers scattered around that she'd been working on. There was no possible way Midnight Strategist could have known that, unless he was somehow watching my house. I woke up my mum and told her what had happened. Janet immediately called my dad, and then called the police. Officer Patterson responded to our house that night and took my report very seriously. Officer Patterson said what I was describing sounded like someone was conducting surveillance on our family and using the information to build trust with me online. He was particularly concerned that this person knew so many details about our house layout and schedules. The investigation revealed that someone had been watching our house for months. They'd installed tiny cameras in trees around our property and had been monitoring our daily routines. They'd also hacked into our home Wi-Fi network and were accessing our devices, including security cameras we didn't even know had been compromised. The police found that Midnight Strategist had been collecting detailed information about my family's habits, mapping out when we were home or away, and learning the layout of our house. Officer Patterson said this was consistent with someone planning a break-in, or worse. The technical investigation showed that Midnight Strategist had been using our gaming conversations to fill in gaps in the information he'd gathered through surveillance. He'd ask me questions about things he couldn't observe directly, like which rooms were my parents' favorite places to relax, or where we kept valuable items. Most disturbing was discovering that Midnight Strategist knew I was often alone in the basement for hours at a time, especially when my dad was traveling. He'd been learning my family's schedule so he'd know the best times to approach our house without being detected. The police traced Midnight Strategist's online accounts and found he was actually a 34-year-old man named Marcus, who lived about 20 minutes from our house. Marcus had been targeting teenage gamers in our area, using online friendships to gather intelligence for home invasions. Marcus was arrested before he could act on whatever he'd been planning, but police found evidence that he'd been preparing to break into our house. He had detailed floor plans, schedules showing when each family member would be home or away, and even photos of our security system. During the trial, we learned that Marcus had used similar tactics with at least 4 other families. In 2 cases, he'd successfully broken into homes while the families were away, stealing electronics and personal items. The gaming friendships were just reconnaissance for real-world crimes. I stopped playing online games entirely after that experience. The idea that someone could use casual conversation to map out your entire life is terrifying. Marcus had turned what I thought was a normal friendship into a tool for stalking my family and planning crimes against us. Even now, I'm paranoid about sharing personal information online or with people I don't know in real life. The experience taught me that predators can be incredibly patient and sophisticated in how they gather information about potential victims.